The Starfleet life with the USS Dauntless. Are you brave enough to be a Starfleet officer? Do you have what it takes? Greetings. I am Admiral Swart, Commanding Officer, USS Dauntless, and this is the briefing with the Admiral for stardate -269896.9. I am the Admiral in question, and today we're going to be talking about the policy updates for the USS Dauntless for 2025. But before we do that, I'd like to just drop a couple of reminders. Firstly, these streams are recorded live on Discord and YouTube. We stream them out typically every Tuesday at 12:30 in the afternoon, South African Standard Time, which is admittedly a difficult time for most people to make it. It's the middle of a workday, so don't feel like you have to be obliged to attend. This is a priority 3 event for staff for Dauntless active duty personnel, which means you're not required to attend. But if you can, please do. We'd love to see you. If you can't attend live, then that is perfectly fine. You're welcome to watch the videos after the fact on YouTube or Facebook. The links will be posted in the announcements channel in the USS Dauntless Discord, so all active duty personnel and reserves can see it there. And you can catch up with us after the fact. If you are an active duty personnel, you're welcome to join us here in the screening room during the recording time and participate in the conversation here in the chat. Please, if you do so and you'd like to ask me a question or make a comment that you need me to see, please make sure that you @tag me in your comment or question so that I can find it at the end of the show. There tends to be a lot of conversation, a lot of chatter in the chat, which is great. That's what it's for. But when I'm reviewing the chat log at the end of the episode, there can be quite a lot to scroll through. And if you want me to see your particular comment or question, please make sure that you @tag me in it so that I can do so. There is a YouTube chat available for the live stream there. I don't always see that when it comes up, but if you'd like to drop questions there, I'll do my best to catch that if I can. All right, so before we move on to today's topic as well, I'd like to just review what the Dauntless is. This is something we have to do kind of every time because this might be the very first webinar that somebody is watching. So we have to make sure that everybody is up to speed. What is going on? There we go. That's better. All right. Let me transition there. There we go. All right. So what is the USS Dauntless? USS Dauntless is a future-focused advocacy group that is focused around what is essentially a Star Trek fan club based in Cape Town, South Africa. We are a chapter of Starfleet, the International Star Trek Fan Association Incorporated, which is the largest fan-run Star Trek fan association in the world. Starfleet International has thousands of members and hundreds of chapters across dozens of countries around the world, and we are one of those. We are also currently the flagship of Region 8, which is the geographic region encompassing Africa and the Middle East, which means that I'm also currently the regional coordinator for that region. All of that stuff means that Starfleet International and the USS Dauntless in particular is a Starfleet-style club. Every member of the organization has a rank and a title somewhere in a chain of command that replicates the fictional Starfleet. So the fictional Starfleet as seen in Star Trek, that is the science fiction series of television shows and films created by Gene Roddenberry back in the 1960s and is ongoing today. And in that fictional context, there is an organization called the United Federation of Planets, and within then there is Starfleet, which is their exploratory and military service. The real-world Starfleet, Starfleet International, is neither an exploratory nor a military service, but we derive a lot of our thematic elements based on that fictional Starfleet, because that is the organization that we're hoping to emulate, at least in terms of their values and in terms of their broader mission. What is the mission? The mission is to advance the future as envisioned in Star Trek. Gene Roddenberry's Star Trek envisioned a future in which pretty much all of the problems that we face today, things like crime, poverty, disease, war, etc., are all but eliminated, at least on Earth, if not throughout the galaxy. And he outlines several philosophical approaches that might lead us towards that future. So here on the Dauntless and in Starfleet International in general, we try to move the world towards that optimistic future, that vision of humankind, by promoting a number of initiatives. But we're not really going to be talking about those initiatives here today, well, not many of them. Today, we're going to be talking about policy updates. So, as an organization, the USS Dauntless has a number of policies which determine how we function. As a chapter of Starfleet International, we have a fair amount of autonomy. So, we inherit a lot of our policies and standards and structures from our parent organization, Starfleet International. But in addition to what we've inherited from them, we are given a lot of freedom to create our own policies and our own rules to determine how we function as a chapter and as a semi-autonomous organization in our own right. And as the world changes, we have to respond to the changes in it by revising and updating and modifying our policies as we go along. We have tried over the last few years to limit the policy changes to just one part of the year, typically January, the beginning of the year, so that we can all, as a group, get used to the new policy changes for a while before we have the next wave of changes that come the following year. So last year's round of policy changes were interesting, and we're still dealing with the ramifications of some of those changes today. But it is time now for the next wave of policy changes, which will hopefully help to improve our quality of life here aboard the USS Dauntless. What was this? Okay, member categories. All right, so this is the first policy change that we're going to be looking at today. It deals with membership categories. So aboard the USS Dauntless, we have two broad categories of members: active duty and non-active duty. Active duty members are members who, or pretty much everybody starts out as an active duty member. You begin as a recruit, which is just somebody who is here to learn about what the USS Dauntless is. Once you've completed your onboarding, you then move on to becoming a standard position holder, which is what most of the crew is. These are people who are active members. They've elected to remain active in our day-to-day operations, but haven't signed on for a specific slate of deliverables or volunteered for a particular position. That is what a duty station holder is. So there's something of a path here. You start off as a recruit, then become a standard position holder, and then a duty station holder. But that's not a linear path necessarily. Lots of people become duty station holders, then go back to being standard position holders, or they just stay standard position holders indefinitely. All of those options are fine. Active duty is active duty, and that is all great. What we're going to be talking about today's new policy change relates to the other category, which is non-active duty members. And there are two subcategories within this group. Firstly, we have passengers. Passengers are people who are members of Starfleet International, so that's our parent organization. There is a paid membership fee, a small annual fee to be a member of SFI. And when you sign up for SFI, you select which chapter you would like to join. Now, that's not usually the pipeline that we recruit new members with. Typically, we invite people to become recruits, that is members of the USS Dauntless, and then they are invited to upgrade their membership, as it were, and become also members of Starfleet International. Pardon me, there's a fly buzzing around. Passengers are a group of members who do it the other way around. They join Starfleet International and then select us as a chapter, and they remain as passengers if we, as the Dauntless, fail to get in touch with them. This is a thing that happens. Everybody who joins SFI is asked which chapter they would like to join, and they choose whichever one they feel fit to do. And most people who join in that way are happy to participate actively as an active duty member in their chapter of choice. But for whatever reason that we don't really fully understand, some people choose not to engage with their chapter at all. So they are just a name on a list, and we never successfully make contact with them. At any given time, we've got a handful of passengers on board who are just people who've selected us as their chapter but choose not to engage with us for whatever reason. That's fine. That's not ideal. We don't like it that way. But if that is their choice, then so be it. But that's not the group that we're dealing with today. The group we're dealing with today are reserves. So reserves are members who have chosen or indicated by their actions that they wish to be members of the USS Dauntless, effectively in name only, in an entirely passive way. And up until now, there have been two different ways of becoming a reserve. The first one would be to opt into that category, to basically stand down from active duty. Remember, everybody who joins the Dauntless starts off as active duty personnel, but if you decide that you cannot cope with the constraints of being an active duty member for whatever reason, life gets in the way, or maybe you feel like you've made some different choices or something like that, you can stand down from active duty and become a reserve. What that means is that the requirements that you are expected to meet are a lot less stringent. You're no longer expected to attend priority one missions. You're no longer expected to check in with your department head every month. The only thing that reserves are required to do, or the only two things that reserves are required to do, is they are required to maintain an active Discord account connected to our Discord server so that they can receive announcements and that kind of thing. And the other thing is they are expected to check in once per year. So instead of once per month, once per year. Above that, as beyond that, reserves are welcome to participate to whatever extent they see fit. There are a lot of activities aboard the Dauntless that are limited to active duty personnel only, so reserves wouldn't be able to engage in those things unless they decided to change that status. But there are plenty of things that they can participate in if they wish to do so. So reserves are, generally speaking, an entirely passive way of being a member of the Dauntless. The other way that people have become reserves is basically choosing it by their actions. So I mentioned that monthly check-in that active duty personnel are expected to do. If we don't hear from an active duty member for a certain amount of time, 6 months has been the standard for the last few years, then that person was automatically reassigned to reserves because they were indicating to us that they were not interested in being active on a day-to-day basis or even on a monthly basis and continuously over time. So we would just reassign them to reserves so that the administrative burden on the department heads and the other duty stations aboard the Dauntless was somewhat lessened because we didn't have to chase after this person who clearly wasn't actively engaging with us and responding to relevant messages. So that was the automated pipeline to be a reserve. And there were two ways of becoming reserves. You could opt into that status, you could choose to stand down from active duty, or you could become a reserve by default. But it has become clear as the reserve pool has grown over the years that treating these two groups of people the same way is not fair. People who have chosen explicitly and informed us of the fact that they were becoming reserves were receiving the exact same treatment as people who became reserves simply through neglect, essentially. So we decided to revise that policy and effectively eliminate one way of becoming a reserve. So effective as of this month, the only way to become a reserve aboard the Dauntless will be through opting into that status. So you start out as an active duty member of the crew, and by standing down from active duty, you can be reassigned as a reserve. You're still expected to meet those other two requirements, that is being a member of our Dauntless Discord server or checking in, and checking in once per year in order to retain that status as a reserve. But that is all that is required of you. The other way of becoming a reserve, which was through effectively inactivity, is going away. And we are changing some of the terminology and processes around how that situation is handled so that those people no longer end up in reserves. So first of all, we're introducing some new terminology here. So when an active duty member is required to check in with their department head or their direct superior once a month, that remains a requirement on all active duty personnel. Active duty personnel who fail to make that check-in will now receive a flag on their record that is called absent without leave, AWOL, which is a military term. Now, as Starfleet International, we derive a lot of our thematic elements from the fictional Starfleet. Fictional Starfleet itself, and in turn, has derived a lot of their thematic and structural elements from present-day military terms, specifically the United States Navy. Now, absent without leave is not a Navy term, it is an Army term, but it's one that's perhaps a lot more familiar in popular culture, so we've chosen to use that one instead of the equivalent Navy term, which is unauthorized absence, UA. AWOL sounds a lot more familiar and perhaps clearer to the general audience, so we've chosen to go with AWOL. Absent without leave is not a reprimand. So at the end of the month, if we haven't heard from an active duty member of the crew, there will be an AWOL flag listed on their promotion track document, which every member of the crew has. It only serves as a warning, although it will be listed under the reprimands section of their promotion track document. It is not a reprimand in itself. There is no punitive action surrounding the AWOL flag. It is just a warning. A member who accumulates 6 consecutive AWOL flags, so that's 6 months in a row, or let's be more precise, 5 AWOL flags are the 5 warnings that you receive. If you were to receive your 6th AWOL flag, you will not receive the flag. Instead, you will be reclassified as a deserter. So this is roughly equivalent to what happens in the military, where you are designated as AWOL if you are missing from your post for a certain number of hours. I think it's 24 hours, is that right? I might be remembering that incorrectly. The timescales are irrelevant. So there is a certain amount of time after which you are designated as absent without leave, or AWOL, which is that you are missing from your post for a certain amount of time. If you are AWOL for a longer amount of time, I think that timescale is 30 days in the Army. If you are AWOL for 30 days, you are redesignated as a deserter. So that timescale doesn't work for us, but the concept maps onto our protocols neatly. So we have just borrowed that terminology again from the military and just expanded those timescales. You can be AWOL for up to 6 months, after which you are redesignated as a deserter. What does a deserter mean? It means that you are immediately removed from the Dauntless. We don't want to be chasing around doing paperwork behind you. We don't want to be lumping you in with people who have opted into reserve status. So if you are a deserter, you will simply be removed from the crew. You will be removed from the Dauntless Discord server and all other private communication channels, and you'll be revoked of all of your security access to all of the Dauntless systems. If you have been a deserter, your file will be put into an archive where it will be stored for 5 years, which is in the maximum amount of time that we can store documents according to the SFDPP, the Starfleet Data Privacy Policy, after which that document will be destroyed. And that document will also record will store a record of the fact that you were designated a deserter. So if you decide to rejoin the Dauntless again after a couple of years, after having gone through the deserter path, you are free to make that application, and the Dauntless command personnel who are processing your application may choose to deny your application to rejoin the Dauntless on that basis. It's not an automatic denial. But if they look through your record and they can tell that you were a deserter, they can use that information how they see fit. We might decide to not approve your application. So the default way of becoming a reserve is going away. Instead, those people will be funneled out of the ship. They will be labeled as deserters, and reserves will be only people who have opted into that status. Fortunately, we are quite good at keeping records. So the people who are currently and already members of our reserve corps who have defaulted into that status through going AWOL, which is now the new term for that, people who should have been designated deserters under the new protocol will all retroactively be designated as deserters, and they will be removed from the Dauntless roster by the end of this month. If you are hearing this message and you are in that group, you have until then to reach out to one of the command staff to ensure that you retain your status as a reserve if that is what you wish to do. So you have a couple of weeks worth of amnesty, but by the end of January 2025, you will have been designated a deserter and removed from the Dauntless crew, possibly permanently. So there are a couple of implications of this. Well, the most important implication of this is that we have now increased the number of mandatory activities for active duty personnel to 3. Up until now, we had 2 mandatory activities. One was you are required to maintain an active membership to the USS Dauntless Discord server, which is our primary communication channel. If you don't have a membership to that Discord server, you can't be a member of the Dauntless. The other one is that active duty personnel are required to attend Priority 1 missions, which happen once every couple of months, required to attend. And now the third one is that you are required to check in with your direct superior once a month. Now, again, there is a period of grace. You can skip your check-ins up to 5 consecutive months if you feel like you really need to, but we would strongly encourage that you not do so. And that is what the first policy change looks like. So this is the new AWOL/desertion policy, and that will come into effect this month. Right, so the second policy change is better news. Second policy change, let me take this off. We're done with this tab. Okay, good. All right, the second policy change is some good news, and that relates to the reading challenge. So we have a number of mission readiness challenges here aboard the USS Dauntless. Mission readiness is our ideological approach to self-improvement, making ourselves the best possible version of ourselves. And we have a number of established challenges that have been going on for years, some of them. That includes our fitness challenge, in which we record our respective steps that we walk during the course of the month, and we submit our steps to the chief medical officer, and then whoever has walked the most steps for the month wins the challenge. We also have a linguistics challenge, which we operate through the Duolingo gamified language learning application, in which we all participate in our own time in learning respective languages, and our experience points are tallied up by the Duolingo platform, and then whoever logs the most experience points in a month wins. We also have a combat training challenge for people who are studying physical combat systems. Whoever has logged the most amount of hours studying their respective preferred combat systems during the course of the month wins that challenge. Over the last few months, we have been piloting a new challenge, a fourth challenge to add to that roster, and that is the reading challenge. It works in a similar way. In your own time, you read whatever you want to read, and you can then submit the number of pages that you have read to the challenge administrator. The stuff you read is limited only in that it has to have an ISBN number. So you can't just be asking ChatGPT to generate mountains of text and then cast your eyes over it or something silly like that. You can't be reading your own private technical manuals. Unfortunately, Starfleet Academy courses do not count unless the resource material has an ISBN number. So if you've read material that has an ISBN number, you can log the number of pages in the spreadsheet and compete towards the reading challenge. If the item that you've read relates to Star Trek, it scores double. And that is how that goes. Now, this project has been has been in pilot phase for a few months now. Colonel Hubert has been operating that for us, and we all agree that this is a great challenge, and we want it to become fully recognized at the same level of all of the other challenges. So as of this month, the reading challenge will be elevated to the status of fully sanctioned. It will be looked after by the command department, but will continue to be operated by Colonel Hubert. So it'll continue to work in the same way, but what has changed is that now participating in the reading challenge will count towards your activity for the month. So before, in the crew evaluations report, we were only listing the participation in some of the other activities, but now reading challenge participation will count there as well. It will also accumulate and count towards the Mission Readiness Award, which will be granted at the end of the year. And for members who are currently undergoing the induction process for a duty station, the reading challenge participation will also count towards your activity that is being recorded against your prerequisites there. So reading challenge is now our fourth officially sanctioned mission readiness challenge, and it has the same status as the other three challenges going forward. So congratulations to Colonel Hubert. Thank you for initiating and looking after that project for us, and I'm sure it's going to be fun for all of us going forward. All right, so that was the second one. The third one is going to be perhaps a little bit more complicated, and let me try and explain what this is about. So mission commanders are people who run events for the USS Dauntless. So anybody who is an active duty member of the crew can become a mission commander by submitting a mission proposal and then operating the mission. We have two kinds of missions. We have regular missions that happen here on Discord. Those are typically sort of gaming events or streaming watch parties, that kind of thing. And then we also have in-person events called away missions, where we go out in the world and we do something together. When it comes to missions here on Discord, some mission commanders have noticed that there is a thing that's happened a few times where members of the crew will wander into the voice channel where the mission is happening, will log in, say hi to everybody, and then apparently disappear. So their avatar, their account, their Discord account is still connected to the voice channel, but they don't appear to be participating in the mission at all. There's typically some kind of a discussion happening in the chat during the mission, but that person is not engaged with that. So, and until now, that has been an acceptable definition for having attended the mission. But that's not really fair. So people who actually are engaging in and participating in the mission should get credit for participating. But somebody who just happens to have wandered into the room, said hi to everybody, and then walked away from their computer is not in any meaningful sense actually participating in the mission. But it's been very difficult for us to be able to tell the difference between those who are and those who are not. It's perfectly acceptable to participate in most missions passively. If you'd like to, for example, if we're having a Star Trek watch party, if you'd like to just quietly watch the episode and not participate in the chat, that should be okay. You should be allowed to do that. But we can't tell the difference from a mission commander's point of view between somebody who's watching quietly to themselves and not participating in the chat, or perhaps they've full screened their video so they can't even see the chat while they're busy watching. We can't tell the difference between that person and somebody who's logged in and fallen asleep or walked away or alt-tabbed away to a different application and is not meaningfully engaging in the mission at all. So to equip mission commanders with a tool that can perhaps distinguish between these two categories of members, we are creating a new instrument called the Status Report Protocol. Now, this is a tool that allows mission commanders to pause the mission and then submit a request for interaction from everybody participating in the mission. So let me try to describe what this would look like in practical sense. The tool that we had in mind when we were designing this protocol specifically was the Discord's poll tool. So if, for example, we are running a watch party of a Star Trek episode and the mission commander feels like we might have one or two members who are in the channel who are not actually present and participating in the mission commander has the option to pause the stream, pause the episode, and post a poll in the chat asking everybody to sound off that they are present and awake and actively participating. This can look very, very simple. It can just be a poll saying, are you awake, yes or no? And then the mission commander can verify in that way who is actively doing it. So there are certain criteria that the status report request must adhere to. Firstly, it has to say the words status report so that everybody who is present at the mission can see that that is what it is. And they know that if they don't participate, that they're expected to, required to interact with that thing, whatever it might be, the poll. It needs to be visible to all participants. So although the mission commander the mission commander is free to make the status report look like whatever they want. It doesn't have to be a Discord poll. It can be a Jot form or a Google form, or it can be a request for a text feedback. They might ask you to answer a question in the form of a text or any other format that the mission commander chooses, but it must be visible to all participants. So if it is a Google form, it needs to be one that is publicly visible and it can't be hidden behind a password on your Google Drive. That's not fair. Again, it needs to be properly labeled as a status report. So the title of the post that where you've requested the status report interaction needs to clearly say the words status report so the participants know that they're expected to participate in it. The mission commander also needs to permit the attendees enough time to interact with that status report request. So posting a status report poll, putting it up for 30 seconds and then taking it down again is not fair, because even somebody who is actively involved in a mission could need to get up and go to the loo or something like that. That's a real thing that can happen. So not everybody is necessarily looking at the screen all the time during the mission. Even if they are actively engaged. So the mission commander needs to give the participants a reasonable amount of time to interact with the poll. 5 minutes or so is probably the right amount of time. The other aspect of it is that the status report results need to remain visible after the fact, so that there is a record kept of all the people who participated in the status report interaction. And again, the Discord poll tool is great for this. It keeps a record of everybody who interacted with it. What's great about the status report tool is that after the status report has been completed, the mission commander has the option of using the list of people who interacted with the status report as the definitive roll call for that mission. So up until now, it's been quite complicated for mission commanders to do roll call after the fact, because they would have to scroll through the chat of the mission through in the voice channel where the mission was being held and see who checked in. And also bearing in mind that not everybody necessarily checks in via text. Some people just log in, participate, and then log back out again. So you'd have to remember who did that, see who chimed in on the chat, and then try to reconstruct the roll call of who participated the mission from that, which could be quite difficult, especially if you're only submitting the log days or weeks after the fact. What the status report tool does is allows the mission commander to have a definitive roll call in one place, so he or she can go back, find that status report in the chat, and then just get the list off of that poll or whatever it is. So that simplifies things for the mission commander in multiple ways. Mission commander is free, again, to make the status report look like whatever you want. It doesn't have to just be a yes or no question. Are you here? Are you not? You can ask an open form question. You can ask a question about the episode that we're watching or the game that we're playing or whatever other thing that the mission commander would like to include in that in that interaction is perfectly acceptable. As long as it meets those criteria, it is fine. So what this means then is that people who are free to move about the ship, they're welcome to join the voice channel, even if they're not participating in the mission. They won't then get attributed activity for that mission. They won't be given attendance for the mission if they don't participate in the status report, because they weren't actually participating to begin with. They were just logged in and walked away or fallen asleep or whatever. And as active duty members of the crew, we are free to move around the ship in that way. You're welcome to join a voice channel if there's a mission going on. It's fine. You're not expected to attend. And this way, it allows mission commanders to tell the difference between those two groups of members. Members who are actively and participating in good faith, and those members who are not. They just wandered into the room to see what was happening and then alt-tabbed away. It is possible, although it's not really the intention of the protocol, it's not unfeasible that a status report protocol could be employed for in-person missions, although why you would need that is something of an open question, but there's nothing preventing mission commanders running in-person missions to do that. A mission commander is also entitled to run multiple status report requests during the course of a mission. So if it's a long mission, 3 or 4 hours, perhaps you're watching some kind of a live stream, the mission commander is entitled to submit multiple status reports queries and then either pick one of those to use as the definitive roll call for the mission, or perhaps combine the interaction lists from all the status report requests during the course of the mission and derive a roll call from that, or any other combination of those things. There are edge cases that could arise. Let's say somebody joins a mission and they are very, very active for the first 5 minutes, but then there's some kind of an emergency and they have to log out before the mission commander has had an opportunity to submit a status report. Later on, the mission commander submits a status report and decides to use that as the definitive roll call. It is at the mission commander's discretion to decide whether or not to include the person who had to leave before the status report was called. And that decision can also be overridden by the command staff. So if the mission commander decides to exclude a person like that, and that person feels like they really should have been included, that person can make an appeal to the command staff, and that can be rectified after the fact. So it's not necessarily cast in stone. This is all about providing a tool to mission commanders to help make their lives a little bit easier. All right, so those are the 3 policy changes that are happening this month. Those will all come into effect pretty much immediately. Our documentation on the website doesn't yet reflect any of these things, but it will very soon once engineering has had a chance to update all the relevant parts of our internal and external websites. But that is what we're looking at from now. All right, let's see if there are any questions. Let me scroll back up. Remember, if you need me to see a question or a comment, I need you to tag me in it so that I can see it highlighted when I'm scrolling back. I see one there from Colonel Hubert. What did do the deserters get kicked off the Discord server? Effectively, yes. So deserters are no longer members of the Dauntless crew. They are removed from the Dauntless crew manifest, or at least they are moved to a former members section, along with a note stipulating that they are deserters. And that also means that they no longer have any entitlement to any of our systems, including the Discord server. Including the Facebook group and all that kind of thing. All of our public channels, things like our Facebook page, our Instagram page, our Twitter account, that kind of thing, those are accessible to the general public, and deserters are welcome to access those too, but they can no longer access any of our internal systems. So that can mean our Star Trek Online fleet, our Battle.net community, all of those kinds of things will no longer be accessible to deserters unless they choose to reinstate their membership after the fact. All right, any other questions? Colonel Hubert says, audiobooks also count. Yes, thank you for pointing that out. So if you are reading your books for the reading challenge, you are welcome to read audiobooks instead. That is actually how I prefer to do it. You just need to find a reliable way of getting how many pages were covered in your audiobook. The way I usually do that is I go to Goodreads. We have a group on Goodreads for the reading challenge participants. It's just a nice convenient little spot that we can use in addition to the channel on our Discord server. The Goodreads entry for the audiobook in question will typically give you a page listing, but there are also conversion tools where you can enter in the duration of the audiobook and it'll give you an estimated number of pages. I'm sure either of those is close enough for Colonel Hubert, but she can correct me if I'm wrong about that. All right, any others? No. Okay, fantastic. All right, so thank you very much, everybody. I appreciate your time in joining us for today. That was a mercifully brief briefing for a change. Fortunately, it was just a quick update. If anybody has any further questions or comments or would like to discuss any of these points or anything else for that matter, you're welcome to do so by reaching out to me directly, either via Discord or on the YouTube channel or on Facebook or any other way. Or you can pop a comment in any of those places and we'll do our best to address any questions or concerns you might have. We have a question on the YouTube channel. Thank you, Master Chief Kotzer. Regarding participation, when the persons struggle with stable internet connectivity, how would that be recorded, for example, in Star Trek Online? That is a bit of an edge case. So this is a thing that we've had to deal with a number of times with our online gaming sessions, where some members, that's happened to me, have been trying to attend and trying to participate in a mission, specifically Star Trek Online, but have had internet connectivity issues such that actually playing in the mission has been impossible. I'm inclined so this protocol, the status report protocol, doesn't explicitly cover that, although I suppose a mission commander could choose to initiate a status report during the course of an online gaming mission, but the requirements apply. So one of those requirements is that the status report needs to be visible to all participants in the mission. So even people who are trying to attend but are not succeeding need to be able to see that that status report. If you've given up and you're no longer trying to participate in the mission, you're probably going to miss that status report. But further to that, I would say it's up to the discretion of the mission commander in question. If the mission commander feels like you've tried hard enough to join the mission and for whatever reason it's just not working, he or she can decide to give you credit for having attempted to join the mission, but they might decide to give you less credit. For example, you would get double credit for attending if you attend in uniform. And when you're playing Star Trek Online, if your avatar is dressed in a proper uniform, then you would typically get that credit. But if somebody has failed to log into the mission at all, despite their best efforts, they could be given credit for having attended the mission but not having attended in uniform because they never got into game. Their uniform was never inspected, so they don't get that extra credit. That kind of thing is at the discretion of the mission commander, and could be overridden by command staff when the mission logs are being processed during the crew evaluations process at the end of the month. But typically gaming missions, because there is that required level of activity, the status report isn't really probably not the best tool for that kind of thing. You can usually see if somebody is slacking or AFKing during a gaming mission because they're simply not participating in the game. This is more for the kind of it would be more applicable for the kinds of missions where we are watching something together and having a conversation about it, and where it seems like somebody is not at their keyboard, or perhaps they've alt-tabbed away, they're not listening. That's where the status report is probably going to be most useful, but it could potentially be used for online gaming sessions too. All right, that is all for today, I believe. Thank you, everybody. Oh, I'd like to... No, that's fine. Thank you for your time and attention. That is all for today. You are dismissed. Swart out.